This is indeed the Temple of Saturn. I'm standing underneath the Temple of Saturn. So this was built 400 years before Christ. And this was towards the beginning of the Roman Empire and its power. And it must have been quite a sight to see people gather together here to hear a speech and to actually worship the God inside this temple. And so what must have been like in the Roman Empire days, especially in the early ancient time, as they sat underneath the Temple of Saturn and then built all the other temples. One thing I can think of as I think of the ancient Roman society is how Jesus Christ entered as a carpenter in Palestine, in Israel, and discipled 12 people, and those 12 people came into this Roman Empire, made disciples, few house churches here and there, but they changed the entire Roman Empire and touched the entire European continent, and then into India and China and Africa, even in Ethiopia in the beginning days, and Armenia were touched in the beginning, and then all throughout the world. And how is it that the courage of the Apostle Paul and the Apostle Peter and some of those who were suffering right here in the Mamertine prison next door to the Temple of Saturn, there it is, that's where Paul was in prison, next door. So what courage. So here in the Roman Forum with all the temples, and then you have this Temple of Saturn. Here it is. So right next to the Temple of Saturn, the Apostle Paul and the Apostle Peter were in the Mamertine prison. And I'm thinking of the Apostle Paul suffering just next door to all this. Underneath that orange church building is the Mamertine prison, and I was thinking of the Apostle Paul when we went in there to see the dungeon he was held at, and he said, "For me to live is Christ and to die is gain." He said, "I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his sufferings, to know him." The Apostle Paul said, you know, we're downcast, we're beaten, we're persecuted, but we're not destroyed, and we don't give up faith. We have hope, we have love. This is our future, our hope for a future, eternal life. Through Jesus Christ, that Jesus Christ died for these people, these Roman people. Jesus cried for that. Jesus died and cried for the African people, for the Chinese, for the Americans, the natives, the Europeans, and the word of Christ came all throughout the world. And look at the change that Jesus has made through his people of all shapes and sizes and backgrounds, the change that has come, and then the ruins that are left behind of ancient cultures, and what's going to be left behind of our cultures. Is it just a bunch of broken idols, or is there a testimony of grace, revival, and biblical living of truth, grace, love, joy, freedom? Jesus said it's for freedom that he has died to make us free. So let's leave a testimony that people would remember Jesus, not all the rest of the stuff. Okay, this is a classic scene that you'll see walking through the Roman Forum. You have the ruins, you have these rocks and cement, and these ruins that have been destroyed from 1700 years ago, and then the temples behind them that were built even before that, maybe 400 years before Christ. That column is a part of the Temple of Saturn, Temple of Mars behind it, but then in the middle of these buildings. So that's what you see walking through history. I can't think of another place on earth that has been preserved that long. There's the Great Wall of China, that's about 800, 900 years old. We've been to the Angkor Wat in Cambodia from the 1100s. In New Delhi, we went to the Agra Fort and the Taj Mahal. That's only 500 years old. But this is 1700 years old, and then the temple behind me is 2,400 years old.